I'd spent years climbing the corporate ladder, working my ass off to get where I was. The office I sat in, overlooking Oak Ridge's skyline, wasn't just a testament to my hard work, it was a symbol of everything I had sacrificed. I could see the whole city from my perch on the 40th floor of Crestview Tower. The sun was setting, lighting up the sky in fiery oranges and purples. It should have been beautiful, but all I could think about was the tiny blinking on my phone screen. It was my wife's car, Camille. I'd become an expert at tracking her every move lately, and there it was, heading once again to the Rose District, the fancy part of the city where the rich and powerful liked to hang out. I had a gut feeling from the start. Maybe it was the way she'd started dressing up more, always finding new places to go, new girls' nights with friends I'd never met. She'd be so vague about where she was going and why. Just out with the girls, she'd say, like it was no big deal. But I knew it was. I knew something was off. Camille and I had built something together. A life. A home. She'd started her art gallery with my support. Hell, I funded it for her, but it was like she wasn't even trying anymore. There were no more romantic dinners. No more lazy Sundays. I'd come home and find her phone face down on the counter, her attention always somewhere else. I even found a new password on her phone 3 months ago. That's when I started getting suspicious. I should have trusted my instincts. I set the phone down on my desk. The reflection of my own face in the glass made me feel sick. Here I was, top attorney in the city, sitting alone in my office while my wife lied to me every chance she got. My tie felt tight around my neck, like a noose, and I loosened it. That was rare for me. I was a guy who kept everything in line. Control was my thing. But right then, I felt like I was losing it. I had hired a private investigator, Dean Walker, to follow Camille. I'd been hesitant at first. I wasn't a guy who typically resorted to that kind of thing. But when the signs became too much to ignore, I pulled the trigger. Dean had been on the case for weeks now. I opened my laptop and checked the latest report from him. The subject line nearly made my heart stop. Evidence confirmed. I clicked open the email, my fingers trembling. Inside, there were photos. Camille, dressed in a red dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, walking into a posh hotel called the Sterling. I'd never been there myself, but I knew it well. It was the kind of place where the city's elites went to do things they didn't want anyone to know about. The photos kept coming. Camille, sitting down to dinner with a man I didn't recognize. Their heads leaning in close, hands brushing against each other. Another shot showed them in the hotel lobby, practically glued to one another. The man's hand was on her back as he guided her toward the elevator. My stomach twisted. I didn't need to read the rest of the email. I already knew who he was. Gregory Cross. A name that sent a jolt of fury through my chest. He was a real estate mogul. 42 years old. Rich. Powerful. And a man with a reputation. A reputation for tearing families apart. The kind of guy who saw a married woman as a conquest, not a person. I'd met him at a few high society events. He was the one everyone noticed. The charming smile, the cocky swagger, the way he could make any woman feel like she was the only one in the room. I'd even seen him with Camille at a charity gala a few months ago. They'd been talking at the bar, too close for comfort. I'd brushed it off as nothing. Camille was just networking for her gallery, I told myself. But now I could see it for what it was. Camille wasn't networking. She was falling into his arms. I slammed my laptop shut and ran my hand over my face. I'd been fooled. All this time, I'd been fooling myself into thinking everything was fine. But nothing was fine. I glanced at my phone. Another message from Camille popped up. Working late tonight. The gallery's hosting a new exhibit. Don't wait up. The lie was so smooth, so casual, it made my skin crawl. She wasn't at the gallery. I knew that for a fact. I had checked the schedule earlier that morning. Nothing was planned for tonight. I typed a quick response. Huge case. Don't wait up. As soon as I hit send, I saw the 3 little dots that showed she was replying, and I knew. I knew that she was relieved. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. I leaned back in my chair and looked out at the city again. I should have felt something more than anger, something more than the crushing realization that my whole life had been a lie, but instead, all I could feel was cold. Cold and alone. And I was done pretending that I didn't see the truth. I was done. That night, after Camille's text, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The fury swirling in my chest was too much. It felt like a fire that wouldn't burn out, a heat that burned from the inside out. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her in that damn red dress, walking into the Sterling with him. That smug bastard Gregory Cross. I needed more proof. I couldn't just sit here and stew in my anger. I had to know the full extent of this betrayal. So, I did what I'd been avoiding for days now. I checked my security cameras. I had cameras installed in our house months ago, under the guise of security for the gallery's artwork. I wasn't fooling anyone. It was my way of keeping tabs on things, of making sure everything was still running smoothly, of making sure she was still being faithful. But now I realized I'd been using them to spy on my own wife. The live feed popped up on my screen. The camera in our bedroom showed Camille, rushing around, lighting candles, fluffing pillows. She was putting on a show for someone, that much was clear. I stared at the screen, my fists clenched. She was preparing for Gregory's visit, again. The way she moved, the way she lit the candles with such care, almost as if it was a ritual. Her face was lit up with that same sick, satisfied smile she used to give me on our good nights. But now it was for him. I felt my heart drop to my stomach. It wasn't just the act of her cheating. It was how easy it seemed for her. How little she cared about me. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. I'd seen that look before. The excitement, the anticipation. It was the kind of expression she used to give me before one of our dates. The one where I would pick her up and we'd go out to dinner, just the two of us. We'd laugh, talk about our dreams, our plans for the future. But now that look was reserved for him. I stood up, my hands shaking as I grabbed my coat. I had to get out of there. I couldn't stay in that office anymore, not with my mind spiraling like this. I had to do something, anything to stop the gnawing sense of helplessness. The first step was obvious. I needed to confront her. But not yet. I needed more. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. I grabbed my phone and called Dean Walker, my PI. The sound of the dial tone felt like a lifeline. He picked up on the second ring. "Dean, it's Tobias. What do you have for me?" Dean's voice was calm, professional. "Mr. Ward, I've got a full report for you. I've been tailing her like we discussed. I've got footage of Camille and Gregory at the hotel. I've also got some background on him." I leaned against the wall, listening intently. "Go ahead," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's no mistaking it, Mr. Ward. They've been seeing each other regularly. I've got them on video coming and going from the Sterling at least twice a week for the last month. She's staying there with him. There's no doubt about it." I felt the blood drain from my face. The betrayal was even worse than I thought. It wasn't just some random fling. It was a full-blown affair. "And about Gregory?" I asked. Dean hesitated, then continued. "Gregory Cross is a piece of work. He's been in and out of relationships with married women for years. He's got a reputation for wrecking families, leaving them in ruins. And it looks like he's done the same here." I swallowed hard. The name was becoming more and more familiar. Gregory wasn't just some rich playboy. He was a predator. And Camille? She was just another victim, only this time, she wasn't the one being destroyed. She was the one doing the destroying. I let out a sharp breath. "What else do you have? Any more details?" "There's more, Mr. Ward. I've attached some photos of them together. Dinner dates, hotel check-ins. There's one where he's got his hand on her back, guiding her through the lobby. It's clear they're very involved." I felt sick. My mind kept going back to that red dress, the way Camille had worn it with such confidence, walking into that hotel with Gregory, like she was proud of what she was doing. Proud of betraying me. Dean continued, "I also dug into his financials, and let me tell you, he's not the kind of guy you want to mess with. He's got connections everywhere, and he's very powerful in Oak Ridge. This could get messy, Mr. Ward. Real messy." I rubbed my eyes, trying to keep my anger in check. The last thing I needed was to go after a guy like Gregory head-on. He was dangerous. But I wasn't planning on confronting him, not yet. Thanks, Dean. I'll take it from here. I hung up, feeling the weight of everything settling in. Camille had been lying to me for months, maybe even longer. And Gregory Cross? He was a problem. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about me catching them. It was about making them feel what I felt. The humiliation, the rage, the utter betrayal. I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let this slide. And I wasn't going to play the victim. I was going to make sure they both paid. The days following Dean's report felt like a slow, agonizing march toward something I couldn't avoid anymore. I couldn't shake the images of Camille and Gregory, her smile, the way she looked at him, like I was just a ghost in her life. I tried to focus on work, tried to bury myself in the piles of case files on my desk, but it was useless. Every time I picked up a pen, all I could see was her, with him. I couldn't tell anyone about what was going on. Not yet. Not until I had all the facts, until I could be sure of exactly what I was dealing with. No one could know, least of all Camille. She kept texting me, pretending everything was normal, sending messages about the gallery, about her art, about the new exhibit she was supposedly working on. Every time I read one of her messages, it felt like a slap in the face. She was so good at pretending, so good at lying. But the worst part? She was starting to believe her own lies. I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't keep playing the part of the oblivious husband, sitting at home while she played house with Gregory. So, I made a plan. I'd seen enough. The photos, the videos, the evidence, it was all there. Camille couldn't deny it. But I didn't want her to just admit it. I wanted her to understand the consequences. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done, not just to me, but to our entire life together. And that meant it was time for me to act. I spent the next few days preparing. I made sure everything at work was under control. Thankfully, Oliver, my assistant, was competent enough to handle things while I worked from home. I could feel the shift in my own behavior, too. I was colder, more detached. Like a stranger was occupying my body, someone who didn't care about anything except getting justice for the years of deceit. I made a few phone calls, arranging for a few things to happen at just the right time. I didn't want Camille to know what was coming. I wanted her to think that everything was fine until the moment it all came crashing down. The night finally came. Camille texted me again, her message dripping with casualness. Working late again. The gallery's hosting a private viewing for some new clients. It'll be a late one, so don't wait up. Of course, that was a lie. I knew she wasn't at the gallery. The exhibition wasn't scheduled. She was headed straight for the Sterling, no doubt about it. I checked the GPS tracker one last time, and there it was, her car, heading in that direction. I sat in the darkness of my office, waiting for the moment when I could move. The itching powder sat on my desk, tucked away in a small vial, just waiting to be used. I'd ordered it weeks ago, not sure if I'd ever need it. But now it was the only thing that seemed like a fitting response to what they'd done. I felt no remorse, no hesitation. This wasn't about revenge for the sake of revenge. This was about making them feel what I had felt. Every time she'd lied to me. Every time she'd hidden her affair behind a fake smile. At 9:45 p.m., I got the confirmation I'd been waiting for. Camille had pulled into the parking garage of the Sterling. She wasn't just with anyone tonight. She was with him. The man who had turned my world upside down. The man who had taken something from me that I could never get back. I stood up from my desk, my hands steady despite the adrenaline pumping through my veins. I wasn't scared. I was done being scared. Camille had stolen my trust, my peace of mind. Now it was time for me to take something back. I grabbed my coat, slinging it over my shoulder, and walked out of the office. The drive back home was a blur. I didn't know how long it took, or what I even thought about during the trip. All I knew was that when I stepped into the house, I was a different person. The man who had loved her, who had supported her dreams, was gone. I slipped through the back door like a shadow, careful not to make a sound. The house was eerily quiet, just the way I liked it. Camille's car wasn't in the driveway, but I didn't need it to be. I knew exactly where she was. I went straight to our bedroom. The bed was perfectly made, the pillows fluffed just the way she liked them. There were candles scattered around the room, their flickering light casting soft shadows across the floor. Everything was set up for Gregory's arrival. I opened the drawer where I kept the vial of itching powder. It was time. I shook out just the right amount and spread it across the bed, on the sheets, the pillows, the fabric of her lingerie. I made sure I covered every inch. I knew how this would play out. I knew exactly what would happen when Gregory touched those sheets. And when Camille saw it, when she saw what I'd done to her precious night, she would understand. She would understand that the consequences of betrayal weren't just some abstract idea. They were real, and she would have to live with it. The plan was simple. Wait for her to come home. Wait for Gregory to show up. Then, I would watch everything unfold from the safety of the shadows. Tonight, they would pay for what they'd done. The house felt eerily still as I waited. I was sitting in the dark, just beyond the reach of the bedroom door, listening for the sounds that would signal the arrival of Camille and Gregory. Every minute that passed made my heart race a little faster, but I was in control now. I had the upper hand, and I wasn't going to let either of them walk away from this unscathed. It didn't take long. At exactly 10:15 p.m., I heard the familiar sound of Camille's car pulling into the driveway. I didn't need to check the tracker. I knew who was with her. I had watched it all unfold for weeks now. Watched them, watched her, and now it was time for the final act. The sound of their voices reached me first. Camille's high-pitched laugh echoed through the hallway, that same fake, practiced laugh she always used when she thought she could get away with something. I could feel my teeth clench at the sound of it. It wasn't for me anymore. It was for him. Gregory's voice followed, low and confident. He was already in her space, already wrapped up in her charm, in whatever she had to offer. I could practically hear the arrogance in his words, the way he thought he was untouchable, like no one could stop him from getting whatever he wanted. I held my breath as they entered the house, their footsteps a soft patter on the hardwood floor. I stayed in the shadows, watching them through the crack in the door. Camille was smiling, her hand on his arm, guiding him into the bedroom like she was showing him the most precious thing she had. They didn't know what was waiting for them. The first thing that happened was the smell of the candles, something sweet and floral, meant to set the mood. But as soon as Gregory sat down on the bed, his expression shifted from casual confidence to something more confused. He squirmed a little, adjusting his position, but didn't say anything at first. Camille seemed oblivious, pulling her coat off and hanging it by the door. I knew it wouldn't take long. A few moments later, I saw Gregory's eyes widen. His hand shot to his leg, scratching furiously at his thigh. Camille looked over, a slight frown crossing her face. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with that fake concern. The concern she'd never shown me. "Something's." Gregory stopped mid-sentence, his face contorting as he tried to rub at his skin. "What the hell is this? I'm itching like crazy." I watched as Camille's expression flickered, confusion, then a flicker of recognition. She reached down, feeling the sheets, her fingers brushing against the powder I'd carefully sprinkled everywhere. And then, it hit her. Her eyes went wide. What is this?" Gregory was already standing, pacing around the room, his face flushed with irritation as he scratched at his chest, his arms, his back. "I can't. This is unbearable. What the hell is going on?" His voice rose in panic, but Camille was frozen, staring at the bed like it was some kind of foreign object. She was panicking too now, looking around the room like she couldn't figure out what was wrong. I don't know," she stammered, her voice suddenly breaking. Gregory stumbled toward the door, tearing at his clothes. "It's like something's crawling all over me. What the hell did you put on these sheets?" His voice was harsh, desperate, as if he was losing control over the situation he thought he could master so easily. The panic was rising in both of them now. Gregory was practically stripping off his clothes in a frenzy, his hands clawing at his skin like he couldn't get rid of the itching. Camille was backing away, eyes wide, the horror in her face slowly giving way to realization. She knew. She had to know. I watched them from the shadows, not making a sound, not moving. It wasn't the way I wanted this to unfold, but it was fitting. They were both getting exactly what they deserved. Gregory was a mess, and Camille was helpless. I could feel the satisfaction bubbling up inside me as I saw her face, the one she had when she knew there was no way out. She had done this to herself. Camille scrambled for her phone, probably hoping to call someone. Probably hoping she could somehow talk her way out of this. But there was no escaping now. Gregory, still scratching, finally turned to her, his voice sharp with frustration. "What the hell, Camille? What kind of game are you playing here? You think you can poison me?" She hesitated, looking guilty, her face pale. Gregory, I don't know what this is." Her voice cracked, but the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. Gregory didn't seem to care about her excuses. His face twisted in disgust as he staggered out of the bedroom, leaving Camille standing there alone, looking like a deer caught in headlights. I could feel the weight of her guilt radiating through the room, thick and suffocating. She had no one to blame but herself. She'd thought she could hide it all from me, that she could get away with everything, that she could play this game of deception without consequences. But here we were. She glanced at the door, the sound of Gregory's frantic footsteps fading away as he stormed out of the house, probably not even looking back. Camille stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty space, and I could almost hear her thoughts swirling around her. What was left for her now? What was left of the life she'd been so sure of? I stayed quiet in the shadows, not feeling sorry for her. This was her choice. This was what happens when you tear apart the trust someone has placed in you. When you lie, when you betray, you end up with nothing. And right now, she had nothing. She slowly turned to look at the bed, her fingers brushing against the sheets, and that was when I decided it was time to step into the light. I didn't need to say anything. The look on her face as she turned to see me standing there, watching her, was enough. And just like that, she knew. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I could hear Camille's breath catch in her throat the moment she saw me standing there, silhouetted in the doorway, watching her. She froze, her eyes wide, the guilt already plastered across her face. It was almost surreal, seeing the woman I had trusted for so long, the woman I had built my life with, so exposed and vulnerable. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. She just stood there, her hands still hovering above the bed like she wasn't sure what to do next. The tension in the air felt thick, suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, steady and cold. I wasn't angry. No, not yet. But I was done. Done with the lies. Done with the game. "What's the matter, Camille?" I finally asked, my voice colder than I intended. "Does it itch?" She opened her mouth like she was going to speak, but no words came out at first. I could see her mind racing, trying to form some sort of excuse, some kind of explanation for what had just happened. Her eyes darted from the bed to me, back to the door, as if trying to find an escape route. "Look, Tobias, I don't know what happened," she stammered, her voice shaking. It was the kind of voice I hadn't heard from her in years. This isn't what you think. Please, just let me explain." I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. "Explain? Explain what, Camille? That you've been sleeping with him behind my back? That you've been lying to me for God knows how long?" My voice rose without me meaning to. I couldn't hold it in anymore. "I don't need an explanation. I've seen it all. You've made your choice." She flinched at my words, her face flushing with shame. But the anger started to bubble up in me, too. I had kept my cool for so long, always playing the dutiful husband, always playing along with the charade she had so carefully built. But now it was over. There was nothing left for me to hide behind. I never meant for it to happen, Tobias. You have to believe me, it just kind of happened. She stepped toward me, reaching out like she was trying to touch me, trying to pull me back into her world of lies. "I never stopped loving you. You know that, right?" I shook my head, backing away, disgust settling into my chest. "No, Camille. Don't tell me that. Don't you dare say that to me. You've been sleeping with him for months, and now you want to tell me you still love me? What, did you think I wouldn't find out? You thought you could just keep doing this, keep lying, and I'd never catch on?" Her eyes were watering now, but there was something about the way she was trying to hold herself together that pissed me off even more. She had the nerve to act like this was some kind of misunderstanding, like she wasn't the one who had started this whole mess. She had the audacity to try and make me feel sorry for her. I stepped forward, getting right in her face. You really think this is just about you, don't you? You think I'm the one who's supposed to feel sorry for you? What about me, Camille? What about what you've done to us? I've been tracking your every move, every time you lied to my face, every time you smiled at me like everything was fine while you were with him. What do you think I've been feeling all this time? I saw the tears start to spill over her lashes, but I wasn't going to let that soften me. I wasn't going to fall for it. Not anymore. I did everything for you, Camille. I built this life for us. I supported your gallery, your art, your dreams. And this is how you repay me? By throwing it all away for some cheap thrill. She shook her head, her voice growing desperate now. I'm sorry, Tobias. I was weak. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't mean for it to hurt you. Yeah, well, you sure managed to hurt me, didn't you? My words were sharper now, cutting through the air like a knife. I've been sitting here, day after day, letting you do whatever you wanted, trusting you, believing in you. And you've been lying to me this whole time. You've been lying to my face, Camille. Every single day. She took a step toward me, her hand reaching out, trembling. Please, she whispered. Please don't do this. Don't leave me. We can fix this. I know we can. But I was done. I was so done. I took another step back, keeping my distance. I needed to get out of this house, out of this nightmare. It was like a wave had crashed over me, and now I could see it all for what it was. The years of trust, the promises we made, they meant nothing anymore. Nothing but dust and lies. I turned my back to her and walked toward the door. I'm leaving, Camille. I can't do this anymore. You've made your choice. And now so have I. Her voice wavered as she called after me, but I didn't stop. Please, Tobias, don't leave me. We can work this out, I swear. Just don't leave me. I paused at the door, just for a second, but it was enough to hear her words cut through the silence. It was a desperate, broken sound, and for a moment, I thought about everything we had once been, every promise, every shared dream. But then the anger rose again, fiercer this time, drowning out the guilt, the pity, the pain. Goodbye, Camille. And with that, I stepped out into the night. I didn't look back. Not once. The drive away from the house was the longest I had ever endured. The streets of Oakridge blurred past, but my mind was elsewhere, spinning through everything Camille had said, every lie she'd told, every moment she'd managed to slip past me undetected. Her voice, pleading with me to stay, still echoed in my head. But I wasn't listening anymore. I couldn't. The quiet hum of the car's engine was oddly comforting. For the first time in what felt like years, I didn't have to be anyone else's idea of who I should be. There was no Camille to smile at me with her fake concern, no pretense of a perfect life, no more lies to untangle. It was just me. The empty space in the passenger seat where she used to sit. The silence. I wasn't sure where I was going. I didn't have a plan, not really. I just needed to get out, to breathe, to think. I found myself driving toward the marina, the one place in the city that had always felt like a refuge. The cold air off the water hit me as soon as I parked, and I stepped out of the car, walking aimlessly toward the docks. My footsteps echoed in the empty space, but it was a kind of comfort. The quiet seemed to absorb the chaos of my thoughts. I didn't realize how long I had been walking until the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, the soft pinks and purples of the sunrise spreading across the sky. The city around me was starting to wake up, but I still felt so distant from it all. From everything. I sat down on one of the benches by the water and just stared at the ripples in the lake, watching the reflections of the early light dance across the surface. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw the name, Camille. There were 2 texts, one after the other. Please, Tobias. I'm sorry. Please come back. We can fix this. I'm begging you. I just stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. I knew what she wanted. She wanted me to come back, to forgive her, to pretend like none of this had ever happened. But I couldn't do that. Not anymore. I typed out a response. It's too late. I'm done. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. There was no going back now. As soon as I sent that text, I knew that was the last time I'd ever hear from her, at least in the way I once did. It wasn't just the affair. It was everything that came before it. The secrets, the manipulation, the slow unraveling of something I thought I could trust. Camille had made her choices, and now it was my turn to make mine. I didn't wait for a reply. Instead, I stood up, walking toward the edge of the dock and looking out at the water. The sun was fully up now, the golden light catching on the ripples. It felt like a new day, a fresh start, even though I didn't know exactly what that meant yet. I needed to let go of the anger, to move past the pain, to not let it define me anymore. But that would take time. It wasn't something I could just forget. I'd spent so many years building this life with Camille, believing in something that turned out to be a lie. And now I was standing at the edge of it all, looking down at the wreckage of my past. I didn't have the answers. I didn't know how to heal. But I knew I couldn't keep living in the shadow of someone else's betrayal. I needed to find myself again, and I had to start somewhere. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and long nights that bled into early mornings. My office became my refuge. It was easy to lose myself in work, to bury my emotions under a pile of cases and contracts, where no one could ask me how I was feeling, where no one could look into my eyes and see the cracks forming beneath the surface. But eventually, the weight of it all started to settle in. I was alone. Completely alone. Camille had taken everything. My trust, my love, my years of commitment, and torn it all apart. And in the aftermath, I was left with nothing but an empty apartment and an endless loop of memories I couldn't shake. I couldn't look at our photos anymore. Every time I opened the drawer where I'd kept the pictures of us from our trips, our birthdays, our anniversaries, I felt like someone had just punched me in the stomach. That's who I used to be, the man who thought that love was enough, the man who thought he had everything figured out. But now, all that was gone. Just like that. I tried to reach out to friends, a few old colleagues, maybe even some of my family. But I didn't know what to say. How do you tell someone your wife cheated on you? How do you explain that you've spent years being deceived, that the life you thought you had was just a mirage? I didn't have the answers. But what I did know, what I was starting to realize, was that I wasn't the man Camille thought I was. I wasn't the man she could manipulate or walk all over. I had spent too long being the person I thought I was supposed to be, but now I was going to be the person I needed to be. Strong. Independent. Not defined by the betrayal I'd endured, but by the way I picked myself up from it. The road ahead was going to be long. It was going to hurt. But it was mine. All mine. And as I sat in my office late that night, staring at the stacks of papers that needed my attention, I realized that maybe this was what I needed all along. A chance to reclaim who I was. A chance to start over. I wasn't sure what the future held. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was ready to face it, on my own terms. It's funny how the little things start to hit you hardest when you're trying to rebuild. You'd think it would be the big moments, the big decisions, the confrontations, that would knock you flat. But it's the small stuff that creeps up on you when you least expect it. The empty side of the bed. The way the sound of her laugh used to fill the house, now replaced by a hollow silence. The way I would make 2 cups of coffee in the morning without even thinking about it, only to remember that I wasn't making one for her anymore. It was in those moments, the quiet moments when you're alone with your thoughts, that the weight of everything came crashing down. It wasn't just that Camille had cheated on me, it was that everything we had built together had turned out to be a lie. All those years, the shared dreams, the promises, the life we built, it was all fake. And it hurt in ways I hadn't prepared for. I spent the first week after everything blew up avoiding the apartment as much as possible. I couldn't stand being there. The place had too many memories, too many reminders of who I used to be. I'd go to the office and stay late, working on cases until I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore, then go to a bar just to drown out the noise in my head. At least there, I didn't have to think about the mess that my life had become. I could pretend everything was fine, that I was just another guy on the grind, living the corporate dream. But eventually, I knew I had to face the truth. I couldn't keep hiding from it. I couldn't keep running. So, I walked back into that apartment for the first time in days, and I knew things would never be the same. The place felt emptier than I remembered, like it had lost its soul, its warmth. All the little touches Camille had added to make it feel like home were gone. The artwork, the throw pillows, the little knickknacks that used to bring a sense of life to the place now just felt like empty reminders of what I'd lost. The worst part? The thing I hated the most? It was the smell of her perfume that still lingered in the air. I don't know why, but that scent hit me harder than anything else. It was like she was still here, like she hadn't left, like she was still hiding around every corner, waiting for me to forgive her, waiting for me to slip back into the routine we had before. But I wasn't going to fall for that. I couldn't. Not anymore. I grabbed a trash bag and started cleaning. Not because I thought it would fix anything, but because I needed to do something. The mess around me felt like the mess inside my head, and the more I cleaned, the more I could trick myself into thinking I was doing something productive. Like I was taking control of my life again. Like I was starting fresh. I threw out her things. The old scarves, the books she never read, the framed pictures of us on vacation. Each item felt like a small victory, like I was tearing away the last remnants of a life I couldn't get back. And with each discarded thing, I felt just a little lighter. But then, as I reached the closet, something stopped me. It was her wedding dress. I hadn't seen it in months. It was tucked away in the back of the closet, wrapped in a protective garment bag, as if time had frozen around it. The dress I'd seen her in on our wedding day, the one that had taken my breath away the moment she walked down the aisle. The one that had meant forever. For a second, I just stared at it. It felt like the whole world had gone quiet. The anger, the sadness, the betrayal. It all seemed to fade into the background as I stood there, frozen in place. I couldn't throw it away. I couldn't bring myself to do it. I opened the bag carefully and ran my fingers over the delicate fabric, the lace, the intricate beading. I remembered the way she'd looked in it, like a dream, like she was the one. The woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. The woman I'd thought was my forever. But forever didn't exist anymore. Not with her. So I packed it back up, carefully, and shoved it into the farthest corner of the closet. I didn't want to deal with it yet. Maybe I would get rid of it later, but not now. Not when the pain still felt too raw. Instead, I decided to take a walk. I grabbed my jacket and headed out the door, trying to ignore the ache in my chest. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't have a plan, but I needed to get out of the apartment again. I needed some air. I needed to remind myself that I was still alive, that I was still here, despite everything that had happened. The city was quieter now, the streets starting to empty as people returned to their daily routines. I walked through the Rose District, the part of town Camille had always loved. It was her favorite place, full of art galleries, little coffee shops, and trendy boutiques. I hated that I even knew that now. I hated that I could picture her walking down these very streets with Gregory, laughing like nothing mattered, like she hadn't promised me her heart. But I couldn't let myself fall apart. I had to keep moving forward. No matter how much I wanted to turn back the clock, to fix everything, to go back to the days when we were happy. I couldn't. I wasn't that man anymore. I stopped in front of a small cafe that Camille and I used to frequent. It was one of those places where the barista knew your name and your order, a place where we'd talk about everything and nothing over a cup of coffee. I hadn't been there since everything happened, but I knew it was time to face it. I stepped inside, and the barista smiled at me, greeting me like nothing had changed. I ordered my usual black coffee, and took a seat by the window. As I sipped the coffee, I tried not to think about her, not to think about what had happened. But it was hard. So hard. Eventually, I realized something. I wasn't broken. Not yet. I was still standing, still breathing, still moving forward. The road ahead wasn't clear. I didn't know where I was going. But for the first time in a while, I had the feeling that maybe I was going to be okay. Maybe. The sound of a door opening behind me pulled me out of my thoughts. I glanced up, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw Camille standing in the doorway. But when I blinked, she was gone. It was just a trick of the light, or maybe just my mind playing tricks on me. But it was a reminder that I had to keep moving. The past was over, and there was no going back. And in that small quiet cafe, I made a promise to myself. I would rebuild. One step at a time. The weeks that followed felt like a strange blur of progress and setbacks, of moments when I thought I had it all figured out, only for the rug to be pulled out from under me again. There were times I would wake up in the morning and feel like a part of me had died with Camille's betrayal, and other times, I'd feel a sense of relief, like I was finally waking up from a nightmare. But no matter how many steps I took forward, I still had that feeling, like a shadow following me everywhere I went. Work, as always, became my anchor. The firm kept me busy. Endless cases, mergers, and high-stakes negotiations. I threw myself into it, and in a lot of ways it worked. I was good at it. I was the guy people relied on to fix their problems. But every time I signed another contract or closed another deal, a small part of me felt like I was living someone else's life. I wasn't the same person anymore. Not after what Camille had done. I even started seeing a therapist, though I wasn't sure it was helping at first. Talking about Camille's affair to a stranger felt like giving away pieces of my soul. But slowly, something began to shift. It wasn't about forgiving her or forgetting what had happened. It was about understanding what I needed. About reclaiming my power, not for her, but for myself. One evening, just after a particularly long day at the office, I came home to the apartment to find a letter sitting on the kitchen counter. Camille's handwriting was unmistakable. My heart clenched as I saw it, but I forced myself to open it. It read, "Tobias, I know I've broken you in ways that can never be fixed. I understand if you hate me. I can't take back what I've done, but I want you to know how deeply sorry I am. For everything. I never meant for any of this to happen. Please, just know that you meant the world to me, and I will always regret hurting you. Camille." I sat there staring at the letter for what felt like forever, holding it in my hands, letting her words sink in. At first, I wanted to rip it up. I wanted to throw it in the trash and never think about her again. But instead, I folded it up and put it in the drawer, where all the other memories lived. Maybe I wasn't ready to let go of it just yet. But I was getting there. That night, I finally took the step I had been avoiding for so long. I packed up everything I could from the apartment. All the pictures, all the things that reminded me of her. I didn't want to keep them as a reminder of the betrayal. I didn't want to hold on to the past, no matter how much it hurt. I hired a moving company to take everything to storage, but there was one thing I couldn't let go of, our wedding bands. I couldn't throw them out. Instead, I kept them in a small box on my desk, hidden away but always there. It was a small piece of what I had once believed in, and for now, I wasn't ready to part with it. But someday I knew I would. In the weeks that followed, I felt something shift. Not all at once, but slowly. Little by little, I started feeling like myself again. Not the man Camille had betrayed, but the man I was before all of this. Strong, capable, and independent. I began to reclaim my life. I started to reconnect with old friends. I found myself laughing again, genuinely laughing, at things I used to find funny before the weight of the world had crashed down on me. I went to the gym again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. And slowly, I started to meet people who didn't know about my past, who didn't know about Camille or the pain I'd been carrying around. It felt good to be seen for who I was, not as someone's husband or a man betrayed. And then, one day, a few months after everything went down, I ran into someone I hadn't expected to see. It was at a fundraiser, of all places. A charity event for a local cause, something that had nothing to do with me but felt like the right thing to attend. I wasn't even looking for a connection, just trying to be out in the world again, breathing in the air of normalcy. I spotted her across the room. A woman I didn't recognize, but there was something about her that felt different. She had this warmth, this openness in her eyes that instantly put me at ease. We talked for a few minutes, then an hour, and before I knew it, I realized I was smiling again in a way that wasn't forced, a way that felt real. Her name was Emily, and she didn't ask about my past. She didn't need to. She just listened. We talked about everything and nothing. She didn't look at me with pity, or make me feel like I had a scar on my soul. She made me feel like I could be whole again. I didn't know if this was the start of something. I wasn't ready to jump into anything with anyone. Certainly not after what I'd been through. But I realized something important that night. There was still a part of me that could heal. There was still a future beyond Camille, beyond the heartbreak. And that was enough for me to move forward. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, life has a way of surprising you. Even when you feel like you've been broken beyond repair, there's always the possibility of rebuilding, piece by piece. As I walked away from that event, I didn't feel like a man trapped in the past anymore. I felt like a man with a future I could define for myself. A future where betrayal didn't dictate my worth. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free.